Round 15 here at Grand Prix Sacramento. TJ Rogers here with Paul Rietzel, and we are now watching the players who are fighting for a shot in the top 8. If they win, they will be moving into that final tier of competition here. They will be really battling for the top prizes.
Yeah, and we mentioned John Walski taking down Sam Black earlier. Yam Wing Chun have to take a mulligan here. If you've watched Yam Wing Chun before, you know that he likes to sweat his draw step every turn by putting it at the back of his hand and then very slowly squeezing it to the front. Likes to torture himself with his draw step. So if you're a superstitious player, you probably strongly identify with Yam Wing Chun. If you're someone who likes time efficiency, not going to be a fan.
And we see that revitalize on turn 2. We saw that previously from John Walski. Just firing that one off, it's a way to churn through his deck a little bit, gain a bit of life, but mostly I think they're for the card draw.
Yeah, there for the card draw. I mean, Revitalize is the type of card that sometimes it's amazing in those white-black decks. It's rarely going to be embarrassing, and in non-white-black decks, it's rarely going to be exactly what you want, but certainly no problem to play a cantrip in your deck with a small incremental advantage.
Lockstone Linebreaker did come down to the battlefield, but a shock from Yam Wing Chun quickly cleaned up that card, and we are back to an empty board. But it is going to be, wow, that Leonin War Leader that we saw dominate the last round at the very end created a significant amount of these. It's just going to be an Onaki Ogre that gets in the way of it. Now, it is a 4-2. Those stats do line up against the 4-4 Leonin, but anything from John Walski, and he'll be able to attack him very happily.
Yeah, and brutal spot here for Yam Wing Chun. He had a copy of Electrify in his hand, but just could not find a 4th mana on turn 4, and look at this.
Mirror image copying the Leonin. That is not a legend. Now you get 2 copies of this 4-4, attacks very happily in, removes this 4-power creature, and still has a copy of this Leonin, as well as the 2 lifelinking cats. John Walski is going to go up to 25, Yam Wing Chun down to 18, and still a very commanding board for John Walski. Yam Wing Chun struggling, does not hit the land drop, has got some of these green cards that can stop this. The Thorn Knight Wolves, even I think Havoc Devils in hand, but was not able to deploy them, and this game is going to be running away in John Walski's favor.
Yeah, and again, that same Electrify that he had before, if he could just find the 4th land, would get him right back into it, but unfortunately for Yam, not able to sweat out that 4th land, and of course now his deck tortures him with it one turn too late.
And he's just going to pick up those cards. He does find the last mountain, but that's not going to be enough against Starcrown Stag. That's not going to be enough against Leonin War Leader. That's not going to be enough against just the amount of pressure that John Walski was bringing to the table.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Yam, this sometimes happens. You mulligan, you miss a land drop, and in those kinds of games, you really need your opponent to not have one of their best rares. And John, we saw miss one land drop, but Yam unfortunately missed multiple land drops. So one of those non-games that occasionally occurs, and hopefully for Yam and his top 8 chances, he's able to draw at least 2, if not all 3 colors of his mana in games 2 and 3.
And we're catching up with real time here in the venue, which means that we're really seeing the sideboard process for the first time today. And one thing that I'm curious about is that I think a lot of players, they play at their local game store, they'll play in Friday Night Magic. They may not really value the sideboarding aspect of limited play to the same capacity that we're seeing these players do in both sealed and in draft. Can you tell me a little bit about what kind of role sideboarding can play in these high-pressure limited games?
Yeah, I mean, so there are some certain cards that are very obvious sideboard options, disenchant effects, things like duress, cancel against really expensive things that you're going to want to bring in if you see certain cards that they match up really well against. But additionally, there are certain creature types that your opponent might show you, creature sizes rather, that your opponent might show you, where you want to board in creatures that match up really well against that size. For example, let's say your opponent, you see a bunch of 2/1s from them in game 1. You might go to your sideboard and try to bring in some 1/3s, for game 2, because they do a good job of holding off the 2/1s. Or likewise, if your opponent shows you a bunch of Onaki Ogres and 4/2s and 3/2s, now you go to your sideboard and bring in 2-mana 2/1s that can trade and put you up a mana. So that's something you might see. Other than that, sometimes you see players curve move around the edges. Both of these players have a light splash. Occasionally, you'll see if your opponent, if you feel like you have a really good matchup and a good deck, you might see a player remove that splash and go down to a more consistent 2-color mana base, just feeling like if I can play the game, I'm going to have a good chance to win. So those are the types of things. Occasionally, you see as more in sealed deck than in draft, you might see a player dip into a new color for game 3. So add a kind of splash. Let's say if they have something like Invoke the Divine, a disenchant effect against a really powerful artifact, and they're not playing white in their main deck, if they feel like they're going to definitely lose to that artifact if they can't remove it, they might do what I call a grimy splash, basically a splash where you're just playing like 3 planes or something like that after board. So there's a lot of those types of options, and you see both players it looks like they're mostly just kind of tuning around the edges.
Yeah, and we saw, we didn't get to see a whole lot of Yan Chun's deck. So John Walski, his main impression that he received that this is a red deck. He saw 3 mountains, and he saw that there is that Unaki Ogre. Being in the color pairing that John Walski is, that is a color pair that does have options as far as these smaller 2-power creatures. Right,
and John didn't see a lot of the really high-powered cards in Yan Chun's deck. Yan Chun has access to Vivictus Asmadi the Dire, he has access to Draconic Disciple, to Vivian Reed the Planeswalker, to Goreclaw the Terror of Kalsisma. So lots of really, really powerful cards from Yan Chun. There it just looked like he was playing a bad mono red deck, but that just is sometimes your deck doesn't give you the right color land.
Yan Chun just goes for a quick little trick shot with a card from his deck. Went a little bit awry.
Yeah.
So as they're heading into this game 2, one thing to remember is that this match, as well as the others that we see in this round, we are in a section of the day where these players are fighting for the top 8, and if they win, they're in.
Yeah, these players can know very safely that if they win, they're in. It looks like there might be a little bit of a logjam at 39, potentially, depending on how some of the other matches work out. But with the tiebreakers these players have, they don't have to worry about that. This is a clean win and in for Yam and John.
All right, and we are going to be heading into this one, taking a look at the opening 7s here. We saw a mulligan in the last game for Yan Chun. Did not end well for him. He ended up falling with a pretty reduced mana base, was separated from some of the colors that he had access to. And now we're going to be kicking off with a mountain, a plains, following up from John Walski, and it's going to go right back to Yam. No 1-mana plays as of yet. It's a forest joining the battlefield, and these players just deploying some land, drawing those cards, assembling that game plan.
Yeah, and John's saying, oh, forest. Okay, I knew there was something going on there.
All right, and just as a quick update from elsewhere in the field, we did see that intentional draw from Max Mick as well as Richard Tam. However, Dylan Ellis and Richard Liu are going to be playing out their match, so that is going to be another high-profile matchup that we'll probably be trying to keep up.
Yeah, so Richard and Max are going to be into the top 8. Looks like the winner of Dylan and Richard are going to be into the top 8. If Dylan loses, he still has potentially a chance, depending on how things break out. Richard will need to win in order to make it.
So we're going to see a Gift of Paradise come down for Yan Chun. Adds a couple of mana, gains 3 life, so we see him up to 23. John Walski doing the same with a Revitalize. Draws a card as opposed to assembling that extra bit of mana for Yan Chun. This is a 3-color deck in a lot of ways, though the 3rd color is fairly minor, but that Gift of Paradise, a really nice way to enable that.
Yeah, and John's going to be thinking, what is going on right now? My opponent just went land, Gift of Paradise, land, go. What kind of hand does he have? He probably is expecting that Yam's hand is filled with some lands, some removal spells, and some really expensive, powerful cards.
Vivictus Asmadi coming down to the battlefield. The Dire, this is the 6/6 flying for 6. It is lining up against this Surge Mare, and when it attacks, it is going to be destroying a permanent on both sides of the battlefield, and each of those players are then... Oh, and Luminous Bonds coming down, so never mind. That attack is not going to happen. That triggered ability is not going to happen in the meantime, and Yan Chun is going to have to make do. This Vivictus Asmadi a little bit tied up at the moment.
Yeah, and a really suspicious non-attack by John there, right? So he had the option to attack with Surge Mare, pump it, and use a loot ability, but instead left up a blue and a white. He does have access to 2 Disperse and an Essence Scatter in his deck, and Yam is going to have a very strong suspicion that John has one of those cards in his hand since he declined to just get in for a free 2 damage.
It's going to be more suspicion than a staircase these days.
Yeah, and you know, for John, I mean, good clean living to have that Luminous Bonds there. His only clean answer to resolve Victus Asmati is Luminous Bonds. He does have things like Take Vengeance or the ability to disperse it and Essence Scatter it, but of course those would require, you know, either going down a card or potentially letting Victus hit you, neither of which is particularly attractive. So Luminous Bonds the best and cleanest answer.
It's going to be Strangling Spores coming down at this Surge Mare. We did see it activate, so it gets +2, -2, becomes a 2/3, and that Strangling Spore is able to eliminate it at that point because that -3/-3, 0 toughness.
Yep, and you know, Yam looks like to have flooded out just a little bit. He does have access to a Spark Tongue Dragon, but wants to get something onto the battlefield to get things going.
Yeah, and that Spark Tongue Dragon, 1 more mana, and it will be able to come down and also have access to that Lightning Bolt or that 3 damage to any target ability. So fires down to Havoc Devils, but an Essence Scatter is going to answer that one very cleanly, and it's going to be an Aven Wind Mage coming down to the battlefield for John Walski. This is the flying 2/2 that as he casts some of those instants or sorceries, it will get a temporary boost to its power and toughness.
Yep, and certainly Aven Wind Mage looks like a pretty attractive target for the triggered ability from the Spark Tongue Dragon.
And that is going to be 5 mana for the Spark Tongue Dragon. It is 3 mana when it enters the battlefield, so if this one does resolve, I would expect to see that 3 mana come down. That's going to eliminate the Aven Wind Mage, and it's going to be a pass back to John Walski, a 3/3 flyer, the only attacking and blocking creature left on the battlefield.
Yeah, and Yam has to be, you know, reasonably happy with the way this game has gone so far. He's at 23, not under any immediate pressure. He's got a nice evasive threat, and if he's able to find at any point, if he's able to draw one of his you know, really powerful cards, Vivian Reed, for example.
You mean like the one right there in his
wow.
hand? This is going to be excellent. The other 2 cards in his hand are land, so what a phenomenal opportunity to draw into more cards to play, because really the rest of his hand not doing much. This is the one card, and he's going to have access to 3 mana currently to actually redeploy.
Well, I would imagine he's going to just get rid of this Luminous Bonds right away, right? That seems to be... I would imagine that's the first step, is to get rid of Luminous Bonds to turn the Victus Asmati back on.
That -3 destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Probably not going to be destroying the Victus Asmati. Let's get rid of that Luminous Bonds, get it into the red zone. This is going to be a huge swing in for 9. And we are going to be destroying 2 permanents, this mountain, that Gearsmith Guardian, and let's take a look at the top card. Hope it's a good permanent. We are going to get an Aven Wind Mage, which can get in the way, and it's going to be Yaming Chun replacing his mountain with a mountain.
Yeah, so an aggressive attack from Yam attacking with the dragon. He leaves his Vivian Reed dead to the counterattack here. Pretty unlucky, however, right? The parlay was Yam had to hit something, you know, a nothing like a land, and then John had to hit a creature with 2 power. So.
And you know, when you consider that probably less than, of a significant margin less than your deck is going to be a creature anyway, for that random card off the top, it can absolutely, just didn't pay off there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, Yam, despite that turn not going well with him, with the combination of Take Vengeance and the attack taking out his Vivian and 2 mythics going to the graveyard in 1 turn, still in totally fine shape. He still has the biggest creature on the board.
Thornhead Wolves, so he's actually has the 2 biggest creatures on the board. That Victus Asmati did fall to Take Vengeance, aptly named after a dragon like that, came in and just ruined his nice Guardian.
Yeah, and Yam, we mentioned, you know, has a really high power level for late in the game. So with his mana set up really well, a good board position, and then obviously a really nice density of powerful cards left in his deck, you know, he can't be too upset about the way this is developed.
Knightly Valor coming down on this Aven Wind Mage. That is going to create a knight, and now the flying creature on John's side of the battlefield is a 4/4 with Vigilance. That means that it can both attack in for a sizable amount, but also hang back and block this Spark Tongue Dragon.
Yep. Thornhide Wolf still, you know, can get in here, and John's under some significant life total pressure at this point.
All right, so it is going to be another copy of this Thornhide Wolves coming down to the battlefield. We get a little bit of a chip shot in, and John Walski down to 7. No small margin So it's going to be this 4-4 with flying attacking in. There are no untapped creatures on Yan Wing-Chun's side of the battlefield, so those swings are going to come in uncontested. Take a nice chunk of damage away. That sleep tapped them down, so they will not be untapping this turn, and that gives John Walski an opportunity to close this game out.
Yeah, I mean, Yam's still at a relatively healthy 12. This is one of those kind of obligatory sleeps, right? You're threatening a bunch of damage, but realistically, you just can't say go and take the damage from 2 Thornhide Wolves. So, John using sleep to basically deal a huge chunk of damage and gain a huge chunk of life, but not necessarily finish Yan Wing-Chun off. So we're into very, very close kind of end stages of this game number 2.
Havoc Devils, Sparktongue Dragon, and 2 Thornhide Wolves. And you see him there putting that card to the back and slowly moving it out to see what he's got access to. It's going to be, I think, another copy of a land. So.
And this is a really, really tough combat step here, right, for Yam, because of the triggered ability, that John has. Any instant or sorcery is going to grow his creature large enough that it can eat the Thornhide Wolves. So he's trying to, Yam's trying to think, gosh, if he has something like a Disperse, then an attack with everything looks really, really bad here. But can Yam just sit there and do nothing? I think Yam may be obliged to just hope that John doesn't have anything devastating, since the way that the kind of race is going is bad for Yam.
As we're sort of working through this combat step, just to provide another update down the field, we did have that intentional draw from Richard Tam and Max Mick. It looks like Dylan Ellis and Richard Liu did end up going for a draw after playing for some amount of time. So the current state of things is that our 3 feature matches, the winner will be going into the top 8, as well as the winner between the match of Peter Quash and Alexander Schwartz.
Okay. So it looks like Richard Liu with 37 feels like he's going to be safe with that total.
So it is going to be almost an Alpha Strike, that Havoc Devils and the 2 Thornhide Wolves attacking in those 2 4/5s. And like you said, one thing to watch out for, an instant or sorcery would put this Aven Wind Mage up to being a 5/5. It could be any instant or sorcery, and that would put it into a position of properly beating it. That's not what we're going to see. It gets in front of this Havoc Devils. It actually falls to remove it. We see another block in front of the Thornhide Wolves, and Yan Wing-Chun came way ahead.
Yeah, and Yam's going to take game 2, and that's one of those huge inflection points that comes in a tournament where it's like, do you have it or not, right? If John had something as simple as a Disperse right there, then that combat step would have gone really poorly for Yam, and instead John just had a bunch of lands. Yam went for it. I think it was a good play. It worked out, and we're going to see a game 3.
Yeah, I think one really critical point there was those 2 Mythics were out there. We saw him remove those and then trying to rebuild the point there. But this Aven Wind Mage was sort of a nice defining card. It had such a nice presence both offensively and defensively, and just wasn't quite able to get there when the sleep came in. Wasn't able to close out fast enough. And then defensively, it just wasn't able to get the job done.
Yeah, just the sizing of the Thornhide Wolves, right? We talked about it before, that 4/5 is a size that a lot of the players have really, really liked, that it seems pretty easy to deal 4 damage, to get a creature with 4 power, or to have something like Electrify, but that 4/5 is a size that people have found a little bit of trouble dealing with. And so Yam, as we mentioned, 3 of those Thornhide Wolves, and they happen to match up really well against John's battlefield, and we're going to get to see game 3. So Yam, obviously game 1, mana problems. Game 2, we got to see sort of the full power of his 3-color strategy, and now John has a much better idea what he's up against.
Ooh, now there is another matchup in the mix. We're getting these live updates as they happen. There is another match where Christian Jones with 36 points got paired against a player with 33 points, which means that if Christian Jones comes away with the win, they'll be in the mix for that top 8.
So then there would be, obviously we'd have a 40, 4 39s, and then 2 38s, and then we could potentially have multiple people in there at 37. So, it's when you have that record of 13-2, you almost always expect to make the Grand Prix top 8. At 12-1, it's a little bit dicey, and we might not see a clean cut today.
So the players heading in now, they do have the ability to sideboard for game 3 as well, and it looks like they explored that option a little bit, but now just mostly going into the shuffling for that game 3. And now we are going to see John Walski, who is on the play. Is this a format, it seems to be the case in many of these formats, but initial impressions of Core Set 2019 on the play?
I think so. Yeah, I think that there's enough tempo elements and enough, creatures and situations in which life total pressure becomes relevant that it makes sense to choose to play. I read once an article, and I think I'm not sure who wrote it, but if you choose to play and you're wrong, you're oftentimes making a small mistake. If you choose to draw and you're wrong, you're oftentimes making a fairly large mistake. And I think that at least early in the format, I would have a strong bias towards playing. I also think that even in the formats where drawing is plausibly correct, that you see that more frequently in sealed deck, where you have less focused strategies than in booster draft, where people usually have pretty coherent, consistent decks. So I think that if the players sideboarded it all, it would probably be more John than Yam Wing Chun. I think that John obviously got to see a much larger percentage of Yam's deck in Game 2 after Yam really didn't do anything Game 1.
Yeah, really, John got to head back into the sideboard with the consideration that now a Vivian Reed is in the mix, as well as Vivictus Asmadi, as opposed to previously it was just Onaki Ogre.
Right, Game 1 he saw Shock, and then now Game 2 he sees a bunch of Mythics.
So we're taking a look at these, and personally I'm always a big fan of the no mulligan start.
Yeah, I mean, you like to see some good Magic, especially, these sorts of one game to make top 8 of a Grand Prix or not, to qualify for the Pro Tour or not. They're such major inflection points in a Magic player's career. There's a lot of pro points, a lot of money, prestige, and obviously an invite on the line. So you hope to just see a good Magic decided by the cards and not just luck.
And we're going to see that island come down, followed up by a mountain from Yaming Chun. And it looks like we are going to see some good, clean Magic. It's going to be an Omen Speaker, a Scry 2. If there is any short of lands or spells, this is going to be a card that helps him move towards that.
Yeah, Omen Speaker, really nice role player in these blue-white decks, acting as a nice ground blocker, a nice curve filler, and make sure that your draw is nice and smooth. If you need that third mana, it gets you to it, or it can just help dig for the the more powerful cards in your deck.
Yeah, and I'm really curious because in the last game that we saw, Yaming Chun had very little in the form of an early game, and his deck seemed very much slanted towards if he continues to hit his land drops, if he survives the early game, then he'll start playing these very, very powerful cards. And we're seeing John Walski get aggressive with this Omen Speaker, and I wonder if he's going to, be really trying to apply pressure to the board early. That was what worked in Game 1. Now, Yam was missing land drops, but Game 2 was not able to have that same impact to the board early and very much was punished for it.
Right. Yeah, I think John, correctly understands that he wants to be the aggressor in this matchup. He is the one who's more interested in having the game end quickly.
We do see a Shock take down the Loxodon Linebreaker that John puts down to the battlefield. That is the 3-2 answered by a simple Shock, and it's going to be that Onaki Ogre that comes down. This all feels a little bit familiar from Game 1. All we need now is the Leonian.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Yam, again, looks like he doesn't have green mana or a fourth mana at this point, and really hoping to find one on this turn. I'm sure we'll see him sweat it.
Snapping Drake comes down. That is going to be the flying 3-2, and that did not look like a forest to me.
No.
So, Yaming Chun now in a bit of a dire position, if you will, because that Victus Asmadi is now trapped in the hand. This Onaki Ogre is just on guard duty. This Snapping Drake will be able to get in pretty happily.
Yeah, and you can usually afford to miss about one land drop in games like this and still have a chance. You almost never can afford to miss 2 land drops. So, major draw step coming up for Yam. He almost has to have a land on this particular turn to have a chance.
It's going to be an Aven Windmage that comes down to the battlefield as well, and that looks like a Thorn Lieutenant to me.
Yeah.
And that does not tap for green mana. It doesn't come down for free. Once per turn is a special action.
Yeah, really tough way for Yam to go here. Obviously he's not dead yet, and John is basically out of resources at this point. But attacking for 5 in the air right now.
Yeah, it's going to take quite a bit to dig back from this one.
Jeez, and he just tries.
Oh, no. Knightly Valor on the Omen Speaker of all cards, trying to just diversify these threats as much as possible. It's Aven Windmage, it's Snapping Drake, and it's Omen Speaker attacking in for 3. This is a big swing in for 8. Yaming Chun is going to end up just at 8 life, trying to find a way out.
Yeah, great run for Yam Wing Chun. Unfortunately, it's going to come in here in round number 15. It's tough. You play these tournaments; they're so long, and to have it come down to that.
The handshake from Yam Wing Chun, and that is going to be an abrupt end to this third game. Both of those ones that Yemi-Chun fell, mana issues were a pretty consistent issue for this 3-color deck.
Yeah, tough one. He had a good looking deck. It was an 8/8/1 mana base with Gift of Paradise. It's not like it was such a ridiculous ambitious mana base. Even an Elvish Rejuvenator, it just didn't work out. He kept hands that were certainly defensible with multiple lands, just lacking green mana, and they just never appeared for him. So tough run, Yam-Wing-Chun. Congratulations to John Walski, who will be in the top 8. Joining a few people. Excited to see who else will be in our top 8.
Yeah, and I do believe that we have got access to some more Magic here in round 15. It is going to be, but before that, I'm going to need to hear from you. It's the last round. It's going to be putting the final, addition to this list. What is your card of the match?
I think it's got to be Sleep, but the Sleep that right there to finish it off. Honestly, I would choose Basic Forest if it weren't so boring. So instead, let's highlight Sleep. Sleep was a card which almost stole Game 2 for John Walski, and then Game 3, removed all of Yam's equity. Honestly, Sleep is a card that I think has probably never been more powerful than it is here in M19. You get into these situations where both players have a bunch of creatures out. Sleep can both put games away and win games totally out of nowhere. Fitting obviously that it puts John through into the top 8.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to have some more Magic ready in just a moment, but in the meantime, we're going to have a couple of messages for you. I'm TJ Rogers. This is Paul Rietzel, and we will see you all in just a moment. Grand Prix Sacramento here in round 15. TJ Rogers joined by Paul Rietzel, and we are watching some of the last matches where these players are fighting for their shot, for their ticket to the top 8.
Yeah, and we know that 39, the way the math is kind of breaking here, seems to be cleanly into this top 8. So this is the second of what we believe is a clean win in into this top 8.
Yeah, we do have 3 of those matches where the player that does take that win is going to be progressing into the top 8. There are a couple other matches that we will not have on camera where we're getting a couple of updates, trying to keep an eye on that one. There's a player, Christian Jones, with 36 points paired up against a 33-point player. Their win is in the mix if they do come away with that one. Also, we have got another matchup with Peter Quash up against Alexander Schwartz, and the winner of that one is also in contention for that final slot in the top 8. But we're going to have another match here, and it is going to be Sam Erickson up against Marcus Long.
Yeah, and so this is one of those 12-2 versus 12-2 matches. These players are playing for a spot in the top 8, an invite to the Pro Tour, all the money, all the fame, all the glory, all the Twitter followers.
Dark Dweller Oracle coming down up against Reassembling Skeleton. Now, both of these are cards that actually I have seen very little of this weekend. Reassembling Skeleton has sort of been hiding.
Yeah, good card, though. You know, it serves a lot of purposes. Obviously, it's really good at blocking creatures with 1 toughness. It can kind of keep your life total high. And then if you have any sacrifice synergies, which we see in both black and red, you know, the fact that you can sacrifice it and then bring it back to the battlefield obviously is pretty valuable as well.
It's going to be a Pegasus Courser joining the battlefield. That's going to be a nice way to get in front of that Sky Scanner, which was previously the only flyer on the battlefield, but it is only a 1/1. Now 2 of them on the battlefield. Both of those cards have draw a card stapled to it, so Sam Erickson not actually going down too far on cards.
Yeah, and unfortunately, despite multiple Sky Scanners, no 4th land for Sam.
It's going to be an attack in with this Pegasus Courser as well as the Dark Dweller Oracle, both of them gaining flying. Really, these Sky Scanners, they could get tossed to the graveyard, but looks like Sam Erickson is going to decide it's not worth it.
Yeah, very surprising that he would choose to not double block here, the Dark Dweller. I mean, the Dark Dweller, obviously a pretty strong creature. The Sky Scanners, have already replaced themselves, and they're really just 1/1 flyers. And obviously, that was a chance where when you're playing against a Boros deck, you want to be kind of the defensive player, play for the long game, and protect your life total. So Sam must have something else in mind for these Sky Scanners.
Viashino Pyromancer also coming down to the battlefield. It's a Dryad Green Seeker for Sam Erickson. So that Pyromancer was able to deal 2 damage to Sam Erickson. A quick little note, Dark Dweller Oracle, it is a 2-mana 2/2. It does have an activated ability that is fairly powerful. 1 mana, sacrifice a creature. You exile the top card of your library, and you can play that card this turn. Because it does say play and not cast, that does include lands.
Okay.
If you have not previously played your land for them.
Sure. And Sam is basically a green-black deck. He's just touching blue.
Angel of the Dawn comes down for Marcus Long. This is going to give the rest of those creatures +1/+1 and vigilance. So now this is going to be a nice combat. That Pegasus Courser is going to get one of these other creatures up in the air, plus a 3/3 flyer now on the battlefield permanently joining that Pegasus Courser.
Yeah, and this is sort of what I mentioned earlier about when Sam elected to not double block the Dark Dweller. Now he has to triple block it. So he's taken 2 damage extra and lost an additional creature because he chose to not block earlier. And unfortunately now it looks like he's in really tough shape.
Yeah, and that Pegasus Courser and that Viashino Pyromancer, both of them getting the additional +1/+1, were able to deal enough damage to Sam Erickson to put him down to 10. And it is a Green Seeker against the world, but that world is flying.
Yeah, and Sam actually has a very nice deck. He has 3 copies of Poison Tip Archer.
Well, we see the first one here joining the battlefield. It is Reach, it is Death Touch, and whenever another creature dies, Marcus Long is going to lose a life.
Yeah, so Marcus wants to see how he can finish these last 10 points here. Obviously, Sam with a handful of spells and a Dryad Green Secret to find the lands to cast them. Marcus wants to get Sam dead immediately.
No fear here from Marcus Long. Attacking into this Poison Tip Archer, this is going to be 3 damage that is getting through currently, and it is going to be what? Trumpet Blast and a Sure Strike. That is going to get an additional 7 points in addition to this 3. That is just a kill shot.
Yep, that's 10 from nowhere. So Obviously nice draw from Marcus. Sam stumbled on mana, and Sam electing to take an attack earlier ends up that 2 damage being very, very relevant.
That was the good 2 cards to have.
Yes.
Wow. Out of nowhere, Sam Erickson from 10 to 0. Dread Greenseeker now coming down on turn 2. That's about the best place for it to be. Followed up by a Viashino Pyromancer from Marcus Long. Not going to be that great at attacking into this Greenseeker.
No, we'll see if hopefully Sam can find some lands this game to be able to develop his game plan. He has a really, really strong version, as I mentioned, of this green-black deck. Lots of good answers, good power level, reasonable curve, card advantage, everything you really want. He just needs to make sure that he can stabilize his life total and stay alive. We've seen these white-red decks all weekend really put the screws to people and pressure them.
It's going to be Resplendent Angel that comes down to the battlefield for Marcus Long, though. This is one of the powerhouse cards of the set. It's a 3-mana, 3/3 with flying at the beginning of the end step. If you gain 5 or more life this turn, make yourself, it's make your own Sarah Angel. You get a 4/4 Angel token with Vigilance, and it's got that 6-mana ability as the game progresses to gain +2/+2, and lifelink.
And no fear attacking here into the Archer, really strong indication that Marcus has exactly Sure Strike. And we've seen again, Sam very hesitant to put his creatures into combat when he fears a trick from Marcus.
So that Resplendent Angel is going to be quite a problem. Pegasus Courser coming down to the battlefield, and just seeing that Sure Strike last turn, Sam Erickson is playing. Poison Tip Archer, it's there for cards like Resplendent Angel.
Yeah, and Sam thinking, obviously, when you're deciding whether or not to play around something like Sure Strike, you have to figure out to yourself, am I going to have something like Rabid Bite where I don't have to play into the Sure Strike? So now it makes perfect sense why Sam wouldn't want to enter that combat.
And that Rabid Bite does kill the Resplendent Angel because it is the creature that you control which is dealing the damage. The Death Touch on that Poison Tip Archer means that it could be 1 power. As long as it deals any amount of damage to that creature, it's going to die.
Yeah.
So Boggerbruk joins the battlefield alongside this Pegasus Courser and the Viashino Pyromancer. Also a Goblin Instigator. This board just got wide.
Yeah, but Sam looks to be in really great shape right now. Marcus down to just 2 cards in hand. Sam with plenty of life. He's got the Neonate, which is can continue to drain Marcus, and the Dryad Greenseeker is going to make sure that his hand is stocked with action. So you got to like Sam's position so far in this game.
Yep, that Vampire Neonate does have the ability. You pay 2 mana, you tap it, they lose a life, you gain a life. So we see Sam Erickson up to 16, Marcus Long down to 19. Smaller creatures, lower power, more defensive, but they are getting the job done. Yeah,
and the Dryad Greenseeker really means that if Sam wants it, he can basically ensure that he draws a spell almost every turn for the rest of the game.
And there is Fel Spectre coming down. This is a 1/3. It's got flying, and then it's got 2 other abilities. The first one being that when it enters the battlefield, your opponent discards a card. Has another ability, and this one will be, as long as it's on the battlefield, whenever your opponent discards a card, they lose 2 life. So we're going to discard a Sure Strike, lose 2 life. A nice little bit of value.
Yeah. Fel Spectre is a card that's been okay. It's it's a lot of mana to pay for a flyer of that size, but a nice triggered ability, and obviously, certainly a reasonable card to include in your deck. And Sam really just grinding Marcus down on resources here.
Yeah, that is the difficult part. Of course, it is a 1/3 flyer for 4 mana at the end of the day. And
yep.
Unless you're running a multitude of Mind Rots, it's likely only going to get the 1 trigger.
Sure.
Maybe if they cast a Tormenting Voice. Bam. Suddenly it's got some Phyrexian mana in the cost.
Yeah, and now Marcus, this is kind of the quandary with these low-to-the-ground white-red decks, right? Like, you've been stonewalled your initial attack. Your opponent's at 16 and going the wrong way because of Vampire Neonate. Do I need to make something happen now?
And it looks like that is going to be the case. Pegasus Courser swinging in alongside the Viashino Pyromancer, the Goblin Instigator, the 1/1 token, and this Boggart Brute. Now that one does have Menace as well as 3 power. We see the Dryad Greenseeker get in front of the 1/1 token. We see the Vampire Neonate position itself in front of the Goblin Instigator. Now that's a 0/3, so they'll just bounce off of each other.
Yeah, so Sam's going to want to be very careful of things like Trumpet Blast and Inspire Charge right here, right? Those seem to be the... So this is not a legal block, so that's going to need to... We're going to have to go back here.
Yep, Poison Tip Archer trying to get in front of that Boggart Brute. It does have Menace. Menace is an ability that says that it cannot be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. We see Sam Erickson pull this one back and maybe just reevaluating how we want to go about it. That Viashino Pyromancer seems to be the creature that was given flying, since we have the Fell Spectre getting
Sure, and certainly, Sam must have something in his hand, because the way that he's assigned these blocks, both Trumpet Blast and Inspired Charge would just be catastrophic for him. So one would imagine that he's got something good in his hand.
So still lining this up, trying to figure it out. No, so that is going to be the Vampire Neonate that gets in front of the Viashino Pyromancer, and it is going to be a double block of this Poison Tip Archer and the Fell Spectre in front of it. There's the Trumpet Blast. We've got a response, and it is going to be... wow! Root Snare coming down. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt. A Viashino Pyromancer comes down. This is the first time that I've seen Root Snare today.
Yeah, and Marcus couldn't have felt too good about the way that was going. When Sam lined up a bunch of blocks, that would have been catastrophic if Marcus had something. Marcus had to have a pretty good suspicion that Sam had something like Root Snare or Disperse or Titanic Growth, something like that.
It's amazing. You get all your creatures really amped up for a combat. You start playing some music that they're really into it, and all it takes is a bit of mist coming in, and they're out of it.
Yep.
They're off.
And now Marcus completely hell-bent right now, and really that was kind of like the big turn for him. Sam has really nicely turned the corner and may be able to even begin attacking soon.
Yeah, and we've seen this, last game it was actually a pretty similar story for Marcus Long. There was just, when he went all in that time, it worked with a Sure Strike and a Trumpet Blast. But this time, things did not go well. Sam Erickson, I have to imagine that Root Snare came in from the sideboard.
Oh, yeah.
Really put on a good show there.
Yep, and this is exactly the right time for it.
So we have got another Goblin Instigator off the top of the library. That means that there are 4 1/1 Goblins, 2 of them tokens, 2 of them Instigators. Also the Boggart Brute and the Pegasus Courser, and 2 copies of that Viashino Pyromancer. So 8 creatures on this board, but none of them larger than 3 power.
Yeah, and so Sam has the option here of making an attack. He has the Neonate and the Green Seeker that are kind of providing consistent sources of advantage for him in both the cards and the life total department. He could start to force the action by attacking with Thornhide Wolves. I think, it's a very close decision, right? Obviously, you expose yourself to a larger attack from Marcus.
Lava Axe coming down from Marcus.
Yeah, certainly not with the card that Marcus wanted to draw. Is 5 points not going to be nearly enough to be able to get this thing done.
It's going to be Dread Green Seeker, no reveal, which means that, of course, we are drawing a spell.
Yeah, and almost any spell is pretty powerful here.
Yep, there is the Vampire Neonate, there is the Fell Spectre, which is a 1/3 flyer. Now that is facing down against the Pegasus Courser, so being evasive, not actually doing a whole lot at the moment. We've got the Poison Tip Archer, which means that if there start to be combats in which creatures are dying, that does not go well for Marcus Long. It's going to be Child of Night joining the battlefield as well, and that Reassembling Skeleton looks pretty great.
Yeah, and again, hate to harp on the same point here, but that Thornhide Wolves looks like a pretty attractive attacker into Marcus's board. When you're playing against these sort of go wide Boros strategies, getting into some sort of crazy trade where you're trading your creature for a few of theirs is so valuable, and Sam really needs to start to work on attritioning Marcus's board.
Marcus Long's going to play another Viashino Pyromancer. I think this is just a burn deck that's disguising itself as a bunch of 2/1s. We saw the Lava Axe. We've seen 3 of these Pyromancers.
Yeah, but at some point in theory, he has a 6th land that he's going to draw in his deck as well, right? And every turn, Sam gaining life with the Neonate, Marcus basically needs to draw like 3 running Lava Axes from this point.
And it's going to be a Giant Spider joining the battlefield as well. Both of these players just really continuing to put a card down to the battlefield, past the turn, still not seeing any sort of aggression from Sam Erickson. And it's going to be a Volley Veteran that comes down. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Goblins right now. That's going to take down the Poison Tip Archer, which means that now trading any of these creatures doesn't immediately end poorly for Marcus Long. Activating this Dread Green Seeker, and that's going to be a Swamp from the look of it that goes to the hand. Good job of sort of ensuring that there's going to be another land. All right, and to not spoil the top 8, we're going to mute our mics really quick. Observe the match. All right, and we are back. Just to give a quick update of what happened, we saw a volley veteran come down to the battlefield, eliminate that giant spider. We got aggressive with that volley veteran and the Pegasus Courser. We saw the Fell Spectre get in the way of the Courser. A nice swing in for 4, and we are in Sam's turn, catching right back up.
Yeah, so this has been really interesting game here. Marcus, but every Boros' player's dream is to draw, 12 spells and 5 lands, really nice mixture there. And Sam has been choosing to be very passive in the way that he pursues this game, has not attacked yet in the game. So he's just continuing to kind of keep back all of his creatures on defense. And it looks like, Marcus has drawn another spell. So this is when Boros looks like a really strong deck, when you draw, 2 to 2.5 spells for every land that you draw. And from Sam's perspective, the Dryad Greenseeker has been tearing through his deck, and he's been using the Vampire Neonate to drain Marcus, but Marcus just keeps drawing spell after spell.
And we see an Act of Treason come down. That is going to take away that Fell Spectre. Just a 1-3 at the end of the day, but look at how wide this board has gotten.
Yeah, I mean, so basically Marcus drew from a situation where he was in really bad shape, Lava Axe, Viashino Pyromancer, 2 straight Volley Veterans, and an Act of Treason. So in a situation in which I would have given him not very good chance to win the game, drawing 5 really, really strong cards in a row, has him on the precipice of potentially making this top 8.
I mean, when you fill the tank with gas, you can't be surprised when you make it to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, and from Sam's perspective, I wonder if when he rewatches this, he would have wanted to press the action a little bit more. His advantage in this game was creature size, and obviously maybe pressuring Marcus's life total to be able to maybe force Marcus to make some unfavorable trades might have been good earlier in the game.
11 creatures swinging in right now. That is substantial, just offering them up. Now, there are only 5 creatures opposing them, which means that there's still going to be 6 creatures that get through at the end of this. Now, there is the Vampire Neonate, which will be able to gain a life. There is the Child of Night, which will be able to gain 2 life upon blocking. So when we are working through this combat, when we are coming to how much damage is dealt, it's worth remembering that there is the possibility of 3 life gain for Sam Erickson.
Yeah, so Sam's at functional 10, but there's 6 points of flying coming in. So
that wasn't enough. That is going to be Marcus Long taking the win. Wow, that was just not a match where I expected him to come back. You were just saying it, He ran out of cards in hand. We saw a Root Snare really destabilize that powerful attack, that big Alpha Strike turn that we saw. It was very cleanly answered by the Root Snare, and then just there was enough time on the battlefield and enough gas off the top that he was able to resalvage another Alpha Strike, which was putting him into a position of dominating.
I have a lot of experience playing Boros decks, and I can tell you that drawing exactly 5 lands and then no lands for the rest of the game is a skill that I perfected over many years of competitive Magic. It's fun to watch it happen, and when you're a part of it and you're like, wow, another amazing card, while your opponent's just Dryad Greenseekering into land after land and just nothing going on. So yeah, impressive work by Marcus there to pull out a game that I did not think he had much of a chance to win.
Now, I've got a list right here, and this list is going to be of 7 players who we know are going to be in the top 8. In 8th, we are going to have Alexander Schwartz. In 7th, we are going to have Richard Liu. In 6th, it is going to be Dylan Gellis. 5th, it is going to be Max Mick. In 3rd, we're going to have Marcus Long. In 2nd, it will be John Walski. And in 1st, it will be Richard Tan. Now, 4th, that is going to be the winner of the last match that we will have available to us here. So we are going to be heading into the final match that will be determining the last seat of the top 8.
1 seat to give away, only 1 spot left. We know 7 of 8, and only 1 more seat at the dance.
I mean, when you've only got 1 ticket to give out, the player, they've got to earn it, There's 2 people who are waiting for it, and now they are going to have to fight it out. Taking a look at it now, that is going to be the battle between Justin Peloton and Brian Burgess.
Yeah, both players 36 points. They were in that scrum of 12 and 2 players, and we had a clean cut into the top 8. We know everyone with 12, 2 and 1, but the winner of actually this game will be in the top 8.
Yeah, we're joining this game. You might notice right up at the top center, 1-1 on both sides. So this is the deciding game. between Brian Burgess and Justin Politan. We have got a Diamond Mare coming down. Uncertain what it named yet. We'll try and keep an eye on that one, get some context clues once we see those spells cast and that life total go up.
Yeah, and one thing that's easy to forget, for a lot of people who, like myself, have played on a bunch of Pro Tours and have played in a ton of tournaments, is that this is a one-game PTQ. You know what I mean? The winner of this is going to the Pro Tour. So, they'll be going to the first Pro Tour of next season. So for these players, this is about as big of a game as you're going to play in Magic in the early part of a competitive career.
Absolutely. Boggart Brute joining alongside that Goblin Instigator, this Diamond Mare, the lone defender, but being a 1-3, it's doing a great job. It is going to be Skeleton Archer coming down. We are also gaining a life. I think I'm willing to confidently say that Diamond Mare is name in black.
Yes. Yeah, and for Brian, I mean, what a great start for him, right? The Diamond Mare holding off the 1/1 creatures from Justin. Now the Archer, being able to take out half of the Instigator. When you're trying to slow down sort of a red aggressive deck, those are two of the exact creatures that you want to start your game plan with.
Yeah, this is very similar to what you said at the beginning of the round when we were watching Yam play, which is when you see these very aggressive decks bringing in some 1-3s that match up very nicely against 1-1s and 2-1s can be a great option of keeping your life total as kind of buoyant as possible.
Yep. And Brian, has a nice matchup, I think. Brian has a black-white defensive life gain deck, and just his creatures and removal spells and life gain matches up pretty well against sort of a single-minded green-red aggressive strategy from Justin.
Havoc Devils joining the battlefield, and there it is, a card that we have seen dominate some games here today. Regal Bloodlord hitting the battlefield. That is the 2/4 for 5 mana with flying, and if you gained life at the beginning of the end step, you get a 1/1 bat. You pair that with the Diamond Mare. Every single time that Brian Burgess is going to be casting one of these black spells, adding a bat to the battlefield.
Yeah, and like I said, Brian, one game for all the marbles, has to be pretty feeling good about his situation, but this is kind of a key turn for the game, right? Justin has some creatures that have some pretty good looking attacks. He needs to start pressuring Brian's life total, and ideally get that Regal Bloodlord off the board.
Yeah, and there is the option of doing so. There's an Electrify in hand for Justin Politan, so there is one option which would use all of his available mana, but that would eliminate the Regal Bloodlord. But then it's a matter of, can he really turn that into an advantage even with that situation? It's going to be Skeleton Archer getting in the way of the Havoc Devils, both creatures going to the graveyard, and it will be 1 damage that gets through to Brian Burgess. The Electrify going to eliminate the Regal Bloodlord, and we're left with only a Bat and a Diamond Mare up against a Boggart Brute and a Goblin Instigator.
Yeah, and Justin very nicely dealing with a good chunk of Brian's board, but Brian, again, healthy life total, the board not out of control, he's got a handful of gas, so you still have to like Brian's situation.
The Bat's going to swing in, and Gravedigger coming down to the battlefield. This is some classic Magic, and Justin thought that Regal Bloodlord was gone, but now it is ready to return that Gravedigger. When it enters the battlefield, return a target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Regal Bloodlord seems like a very easy choice.
Yeah, and again, with the Mare still in play, the Regal Bloodlord, when it comes down next turn, going to trigger again, which is going to trigger to make another bat. And so this is, we were talking earlier, watching some of the drafts and other players about how the black-white deck, when everything is ticking, has a really, really high ceiling, and that it was a deck that was worth trying to go for. And we see Brian kind of working it to perfection. We
have got Sarkhan's Unsealing hitting the battlefield here. This is one that we haven't been able to see really do an enormous amount. We got to see it earlier this weekend, but this is a 4-mana enchantment, and it has got 2 abilities on it. The first one is that whenever you cast a creature spell with power 4, 5, or 6, you deal 4 damage to any target. Could be a player, could be a creature, could be a planeswalker. Second ability, whenever you cast a creature spell with power 7 or greater, it's going to deal 4 damage to each opponent, each creature, and each planeswalker they control.
Yeah, really strong card, and if this game goes long enough and Justin's able to trigger it multiple times, he could certainly find himself back in that game. So, under a good amount of pressure from the flying attack from Brian, however.
Yeah, and that's the kind of card that, firing down a new Electrify every single turn, if you can continually find these creatures while applying to the board. Looks like we are going to see that happen. Thornhide Wolves comes to the battlefield. Regal Bloodlord goes back to the graveyard. This is a card that's got some potential to really throw Justin Politan back into this.
Yeah, and you notice Justin had the Boggart Brute, and he was thinking, if I attack, he's got a pretty attractive double block with a 1-3 and a 1-1, but both the flying creature and the Diamond Mare are so important to Brian's game plan that Justin was willing to offer the trade. A nice aggressive attack there from Justin.
We see the two bats swinging in, Diamond Mare and the Gravedigger, the two creatures hanging back up against a Goblin Instigator, that Bogger Brute and that Thornhide Wolves, which was able to eliminate the Regal Bloodlord. But it's going to be Gallant Cavalry coming down. This is going to be that 2-2 with Vigilance, but it always brings a friend, another 2-2 Vigilant Knight.
Yeah, and Brian doing a nice job kind of gumming up the board here, but Justin, obviously, the more turns you get to untap with Sargon's Unsealing, the better. The question is, is he able to stop the flying attack, and what else does Brian have to add to the board?
We're going to get aggressive. It's
Wow.
Thornhide Wolves and Boggart Brute. This is the 3-2 with Menace. Needs to have two creatures in front of it in order to be stopped. And it is going to be the two Vigilant Knights immediately getting in the way of it. And looks like we're going to be prioritizing the 2-2 creature card as opposed to the token. And I think Brian Burgess might be looking at an Abnormal Endurance. That's going to be the case. +2/+0. And if it would die this turn, you return it to the battlefield tapped.
Yeah, so he basically is going to get another Gallant Cavalry, which is a really nice play.
Yeah, and that is, we saw Justin Polton choose the creature card to be the priority there and absolutely get punished for it.
Yeah, and honestly, it's hard to fault Justin too much for the attack. Brian with a really risky play there. I mean, opened himself up to getting absolutely blown out against 5 open mana, but it actually ends up working perfectly.
Dismissive Pyromancer coming down to the battlefield, as well as a Centaur Courser. That Dismissive Pyromancer, absolutely love the card. It's a 2/2 for 2. Also, you can pay a red mana and tap it to discard a card, then draw a card. You can also pay 3 mana and tap it, sacrifice it, 4 damage to target creature.
Yeah, in this right here, you look at Brian's board and the kind of the creatures that he has. If he has any way to interact with this Centaur Courser, he has an absolutely brutal attack. So, whether it's a trick or a removal spell, anything. In fact, even if he doesn't, it may be worth just attacking with everything anyway and just suiciding one of those 2/2s right into the Centaur Courser.
Yeah, having access to each of those 2/2s that are all Vigilant, which means that they'll also be just as good defensively. We've got Epicure of Blood coming down to the battlefield. Fun little fact here, this works out nicely because now we're casting the Vampire Neonate. The Diamond Mare is going to gain a life. The Epicure of Blood is going to say, because I gained a life, you are going to lose a life. And that's not even including the fact that now this Vampire Neonate is going to be on the board indefinitely.
Yeah, nice sequencing here from Brian as well. We've mentioned earlier and suggested that players don't use their pre-combat main phase to tap all their mana and use all their cards in hand. In this situation, because Brian wanted to gain life off of his Diamond Mare, it makes sense to do that before attacking, since Justin has some blocks that end up killing Diamond Mare. So nice play by Brian, nice sequencing, and a huge amount of pressure on Justin Politon.
Yeah, and of course, that Epicure of Blood, also a 4/4, which means that that's also going to be very adept at pressuring the life total. Previously, that Centaur Courser and that Thornhide Wolves were the biggest things on the board. Might even need to consider using this Dismissive Pyromancer as more than rummaging, more than a 2/2. Might need to put it in the position of using that last activated ability.
Yeah, and really, the way Justin gets out of this game is by chaining together Sargon's Unsealing triggers. So,
looks like we are going to be putting this Pyromancer in front of one of the Vigilant Knights, not going for that Diamond Mare. We've got the Centaur Courser in front of the creature version of Gallant Cavalry, and this Goblin Instigator lining up quite where Justin wants to be putting that card.
Interesting, yeah. I guess the theory is that Diamond Mare is less of a threat now, and you have to kind of hope that Brian doesn't have more black cards to cast during the course of the game when you're as far behind as Justin is. So deciding whether or not the time to chump block with Instigator is now, he decides yes it is.
Yeah, and this is going to be a difficult position. That Diamond Mare and the Vampire Neonate remaining means that it is not at all out of the question to see just a consistent 2 damage coming in from this Epicure.
Yeah, and you see that as we mentioned before, Brian had an Alpha Strike without being able to interact with Justin's board. Justin was able to make 1 favorable block, 1 trade, 1 unfavorable block, but still leaves Brian with an incredibly strong board.
Yep. We've got 5 mana here. It is the Thornhide Wolves. It is the Centaur Courser. We are looking for some way to get back into this game. I think I saw a copy of Recollect in Justin Peloton's hand, which could get back one of these smaller creatures, but wouldn't be able to get anything large and cast it this turn.
And Justin, I think, just drew a blue card, which is just about the worst thing you could possibly imagine drawing at this point.
I mean, does he run blue lands?
He has 1 island for a copy of Switcheroo.
Really? That seems kind of fun. I mean, if you can cast it.
Yeah, it's kind of fun if you're stealing a Regal Bloodlord, but against a bunch of creatures with similar power levels. Again, he wouldn't want to trade any of his creatures for Brian's. Maybe the Courser for the Epicure, but that's not exactly a...
Still got a 3/3.
Yeah.
It's going to be a Bristling Boar that comes down to the battlefield. That is a 4-power creature. We're going to get a trigger off of this Sarkhan's Unsealing, and that is going to eliminate the Vampire Neonate, actually. So prioritizing the card that is going to be draining and gaining life together, as opposed to one of the cards which just gains life, and the other which drains it. And it's going to be another Epicure of Blood. This is going to be 1 life gain and then a life drain. But now any future black spells are just going to double up on that trigger.
Yeah, and these 2 bats that the Regal Bloodlord left behind, just incidentally are just, chipping away. And Justin has not yet found an answer to that flying threat.
And you're absolutely right. Those were incidental. It's good to remember that those weren't even a key part of the game plan. Those just were part of the bargain, You're running a card that gains you life. You're running this Regal Bloodlord, which is a fine flyer on its own. And just through the nature of having your deck do its thing, you've now ended up with these 2 1/1 flyers that have really set the tone for Justin Peloton, that time is not something that is on his side.
Yeah, and when we talk about archetypes that people like to draft in Limited, it's which archetypes can you build using commons and uncommons. And here we see Brian using Epicure of Blood and Regal Bloodlord and Vampire Neonate. These are all just kind of cards that are relatively easy to pick up in draft. I mean, no one except for the black-white player is going to want them. And so, Brian is really just cobbling together a really dominant game plan using cards that you can get after the first few picks.
Dismissive Pyromancer rejoining the battlefield here as that 2/2. It is summoning sick currently, so those 2 activated abilities out of the question. If it can survive Rummaging as well as a 3-mana Electrify of sorts.
And any black card here is lethal for Brian if he had it. So, looks like he does not have access to a black card in his hand.
So it's going to be the 2 bats that are swinging in. A Swamp joins the battlefield, and it's a pass back. Justin at 3, facing down Brian Burgess, who is at 16. This game of this match defines who will be in the top 8.
Yeah, and certainly Brian in a dominant position here with multiple really difficult to deal with threats, and Justin really just trying to figure out if there's any way he can wriggle out of this.
And it's amazing because really the creatures that he has out, very valuable creatures. You've got this 4/5 Thornhide Wolves. You've got the 3/3 Centaur Courser for 3. The Bristling Boar has been a card that I've heard multiple players saying that they've really enjoyed that card's power level. Dismissive Pyromancer, a solid rare, and they just aren't lining up against this.
Right, yeah, black-white just has a nice matchup here against, as mentioned, the aggressive deck from Justin. And
I think we missed on a black spell once more.
Yeah, but at this point, he could just attack with everything.
Attack with everything because you would have 5 attackers into the 4 blockers, but it looks like Brian Burgess is actually going to stay a little bit conservative with this. Just get in with the 2 1/1 flying bats. That is going to put Justin down to 1 if all goes well.
Right, and Brian thinking, look, make you deal with my bats first, and then I still have the 2 Epicures as the backup.
And it looks like we're going to fire down that Dismissive Pyromancer. That was not a block. That was the second activated ability. Pay 3 mana, tap it, sacrifice it to deal 4 damage to a creature. That eliminates that bat. And now it is just 1 card with a Swamp in its mana cost away from a win and a top 8. For Brian Burgess, we are going to attack in, and that looks like a Vampire Sovereign of all things. Diamond Mare coming in 3 different ways. The Diamond Mare, the Bat, the Vampire Sovereign, the Epicure of Blood. It was all coming together for Brian Burgess here. That is going to be 2 game wins, which gives him the match win, which means that Brian Burgess is going to be the number 4 player heading into the top 8, and that is going to give us the full roster of the players who are going to be the last ones standing. Richard Tan in first. We saw him able to draw in all the way down to Alexander Schwartz. These are going to be the players that are making it into the top 8. And of course, we are going to have those matches coming your way. Stick around for the top 8. My name's TJ Rogers, Paul Rietzel alongside me. Join us in just a little bit right after this.